Alex Skolnick, I am super excited to have you on the Basel Meets podcast. We're here in Melody House, and I'm super, super excited that you are here with us right now. So,
thanks for having me, man.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
Thanks. Well, it was a long flight for you, right?
Yes, yeah, about a little over 12 hours.
12 hours.
Yeah.
Wow. Emirates.
JFK to DBX.
Oh, so from JFK.
Yep.
Okay. And how was your flight? Was it the longest flight you ever took, or was there more?
Far from it. I've been to Australia.
Okay.
It's pretty long.
It must be very long. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been to New Zealand. That's a long flight.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think one of those are the longest ones that come to mind. I've been to Japan several times.
Right.
But yeah, so I mean, 12 hours is nothing.
Yeah, you got used to it. I guess after all these years, you get used to it. Well, I'm really excited that you're here. Obviously,
It's great to be here.
Thank you.
I'm psyched. It's been too long to be in, this part of the world.
Right. Yeah. You're here in Dubai, and you were here 10 years ago. Like just before the podcast, we were talking about how you guys were here 10 years ago, a little bit over 10 years ago, actually. I remember it was my last year of university, and when they had announced that Testament were coming to play in Dubai, I was super excited. I mean, I'm still a huge fan. And so I'm going to geek out a little bit throughout this podcast, but yeah, I'm sure that I'm not sure how much you remember of that show. I mean, it was a while ago, but how was that experience for you when you first came into this part of the world? Maybe an area that you guys haven't explored before? How was that for you guys?
Yeah, well, I remember the show very well.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I remember, well, the best part about it was, just being able to play for folks that we couldn't normally play for.
Right.
Not just here in Dubai, but the fact that it's accessible to fans from other parts of the world, from places that are not on the touring circuit. So we met fans from Iran, Syria, Lebanon, all over. Parts that we just wouldn't be able to get to, and they were all able to come.
Right.
And so it was great, and this was 2006. So
That's
we're
right.
also we're still in this period of this crazy things happening. I mean, crazy things are happening now, but crazy things were happening. The Iraq War was still going on. So it was just amazing to be able to play for people from all these regions, and it was just this great reminder that they didn't seem that different.
Yeah, exactly.
We're sort of used to this. Sometimes political situations create these these ideas about people, and we kept hearing people from these places, they're bad, whatever. You're getting this sort of cartoon image of everybody's painted by like the worst types of people that come from their region,
right? And
then we're meeting all these folks from these places, and they could fit in at any show that we played anywhere. They look the same. They're wearing band T-shirts. We're talking about music. It was just so it was a very human experience on that level.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back then was. I was going to talk about this later on in the podcast, but I guess this is a good time to talk about it. This was back in 2006, and just not so long before that, you actually went back into Testament, right? And this was
so it was actually very new at that time.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's true.
And at the time, there was a lot of bands getting back together. I think there was Anthrax that did something where they got back together with the original lineup, and there was you guys as well, and
Death Angel,
and
a lot of these bands.
And also at the same time, there was a lot of super groups getting together, like Velvet Revolver, and there was a lot of bands happening. So it was a very busy time for rock music.
Yeah.
I guess for me, it was, as a fan, I always thought about how did that whole thing come about, where you guys sort of decided that, it's time for us to get back together and to sort of like get back on the touring circuit and just do what you do best?
Yeah, well, it wasn't decided, really.
Okay, interesting.
Like, all that was decided was a few shows, like not including Dubai. It was a year before that.
Right.
It was a show. It really started with one show. It started with a show in Eindhoven, Netherlands, which has a lot of historic significance for Testament because it was the first time we'd ever played in Europe.
Wow. Okay.
Way back when we were touring for our first album, and we did a live recording from there. So at this point, they were doing this festival, and they really wanted the original Testament lineup.
Yeah.
And I had been, it had been over a dozen years. I mean, since I'd played with the band, I had become, I was in a whole different place. I'd moved to New York from Berkeley, California, leaving the West Coast behind, which is a radical move. That's like people in California think New York is this dangerous place, and you have to be crazy to live there. And maybe that's true to a certain extent. But no, it's to move. So to move there was a big statement.
Yeah.
But I loved it. I went there, and I sort of found I developed different sides as a musician. I went back to school, went to university.
Wow.
In my late 20s.
Whoa.
Graduated with honors from the New School University, and it was really focused on like improvisation.
Right.
And I studied some of the greatest jazz players in the world that like are on the faculty there. It's got a great jazz program, and that was sort of my thing. So between doing jazz, I started doing my own jazz albums. I was a guitarist for hire for a number of different projects. I have a lot of stories about that. Maybe we can talk about later.
We need to get into that.
Yeah. But for now, long story short,
Yeah.
Fast forward to 2005.
Okay.
And at this point, I was touring with my instrumental group. The remaining guys from Testament would come through. Like, we were getting along again. All the sort of behind the music drama was past us. And we were friends again. And we talked about, it would be fun just to do an occasional show, whatever, nothing beyond that.
Yeah.
And then this offer came in from Eindhoven, and they wanted the original Testament and the original Anthrax. So that was how the original Anthrax got back together.
Interesting. Okay.
Yes. And we all played on the same bill, and it was really cool. It was really cool to see those guys again. And it just we sort of tapped into the old magic, I guess.
Yeah.
And it went really well. And next thing you know, there's a few more offers. So we did. We started with these few shows in Europe, and then, guess what? Promoters in the United States want you guys to play. Okay, so we'll play. So this continued for like a year and included the Dubai show.
Right.
And at that point, we realized, okay, if we're gonna keep this up, we should at least do an album and see how it goes. And it was great because there was no pressure. We'll just see what happens. And as we were thinking about doing a record, we heard about this tour. I was actually telling you about this early. No, I didn't tell you about this one. This was a tour with Judas Priest.
Yeah.
Heaven and Hell.
Oh, wow.
With Dio and Motorhead.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a great lineup.
And they wanted a really heavy band to open up. And if we could have an album out,
right,
we could have that tour. And it's like, okay, we have to do this. So that was a big incentive for us to get back in the studio. So by 2007, we're in the studio recording the first of the reunion period of Testament records.
Right, yeah.
And we did that tour, and that led to more tours. The one I was telling you about was called the Priest Feast.
Right.
So that was in Europe with Priest and Megadeth.
So that's 2 Priest tours.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then followed by a tour with Megadeth and Slayer called the American Carnage Tour.
Yeah.
Slayer, Megadeth, Testament. So we suddenly were we're doing these great tours with the top bands in our genre. Okay, we're back.
Yeah.
Let's face it, we're back. And then ever since then, we're not putting out records as often as we used to. It used to be like you used to have to do it every year, which was part of what was so hard, so intense about it. So the first wave of the band was just like album a year, straight on tour.
When you first start.
Yeah, and now we could take a few years between records and exist in other musical situations. So it's a whole other situation. Much easier to deal with.
That's really interesting. I mean, there's a lot there for us to sort of unpack, and totally goes against the sequence that I had. But whatever, this is good. So you're talking about. So there's two things here, right? And there's two things I'd like to talk about. But the first is you're talking about you being back and you sort of going full force into this whole post reunion Testament get together or reunion. How did it feel for you, to sort of be back? I mean, after not playing metal for such a long time and just going in front of these like metal crowds and opening up for Judas Priest, touring with Slayer, touring with Megadeth, rubbing shoulders with these guys. And it's almost like it went from, university jazz and then boom, back again into like crazy rock shows, crazy festivals. Like, I'm sure that feeling must have been transformative.
Well, in between, I had started doing guitarist for hire stuff.
Yeah.
So one of the things that came up was a project called the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. Mm-hmm. And originally it was for under a month. It was like 3.5 weeks and mostly theaters. And it really got me doing like screaming lead guitar again.
Oh, okay.
In front of big audiences.
Yeah.
And I kept doing that, and that worked out well because it was like the end of the year. It was a holiday show. And well, I did it for a number of years, and every year it got bigger and bigger to the point where it was competing with like the biggest pop tours as far as like top grossing tours in the United States.
Oh yeah.
So suddenly I'm playing in those years, but right before the Testament reunion, the end of every year I find myself playing in these situations as a headliner with the biggest production in one of the biggest productions in rock, and we had and because it was winter, like most other tours, a lot of tours weren't happening at that time. So they were TSO was able to get the pyro crew from Kiss and Britney Spears, like the same people.
Oh wow,
that did those tours.
So it's like major tour.
Oh yeah, and like the same lighting crew that did. Kid Rock and like all like the biggest stuff at that time.
Yeah.
And so I sort of learned to be an arena performer because that really trains you. Suddenly, we're doing these shows and there's like 14,000 people out there.
Wow.
For the Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and I'm developing performance skills that I never had with Testament because it was always smaller venues. But,
right. Yeah.
When you're playing huge places like that, you have to learn how to perform to the back of the arena.
Yeah.
So I think it was interesting when the Testament reunion came along. I was ready. I was actually a better performer than I'd been because of that experience. But I was also a better musician because of doing my own thing instrumentally, and I think that that had gotten me back into the screaming lead guitar and not just elegant chord melodies that you hear in jazz guitar.
Well, I mean, how about from a music writing perspective? Does that sort of did you take music different, or did you approach music differently after you? I'm sure you have, right? Because you went back to university and you've sort of learned things that you didn't know before, and also touring with the Trans-Siberian Orchestra. And you just said, I mean, you learned things that you didn't know before. How did that help you in approaching metal music again?
Well, it was interesting because I was taking direction. There's a very small creative team, and at the time, Paul, the main guy, his name's Paul O'Neill. He's not with us anymore, unfortunately, but he was a guy that he had been part of a management team in the 70s that had dealt with like Aerosmith and AC/DC with Bon Scott, like all these legendary acts. And he was sort of turning that into sort of a theatrical arena project. So I just, just by being a part of that, taking direction, and if you weren't moving enough, he would let you know, and he would like demonstrate the moves he wanted you to do, and it was a little overwhelming, but it was great training, and just watching watching other people with very different musical experiences run a project. So that was a big thing, and I'd done other guitar for hire stuff where I'd taken direction. I sort of learned to not to be in situations where it's not just about you. It's not just you. It's not your band. Yeah, and all you have to do is take direction, and I think that's a healthy experience. Yeah. But then when I came back, I think I was much better at expressing ideas for the band and saying, guys, maybe we need to not have too many songs of the same tempo, and where the crowd's getting tired, like they can't tell this song from that song. But if we follow this fast song with a mid-tempo song, then the next fast song is so much more powerful. I started learning that. Things like that, and how to communicate that. Yeah. So I think that helped a lot. When I was in the first wave of the band, I didn't know what I was doing. I was, we were all thrown into it. The band had already been around a couple years when I joined. I was in high school. I was 16 years old. Yeah. They were all a bit older. Yeah. But it was still new for everybody, and it was nice to come back. A little over 10 years ago as this experienced player that had been in all these different musical situations. Yeah, it's so you've sort of, I mean, part of my geeking out into rock music, from what I read, you took lessons with Joe Satriani at some point, and this was, I guess, 10 years or so into your stint with Testament. No, it's the other way around. It was actually before. Was it before? Oh, yeah, okay. And how was that, like, compared to later going back to school? How was that for you? Yeah, well, that was great. I mean, I think I credit Joe with really sort of instilling a work ethic and really sort of setting a standard as far as a musician. Yeah. He set the bar so high. I mean, nobody can be Joe, but just being around somebody like that. And he wasn't known when I studied with him either. He was the guy that he was sort of an example of why nobody should get into the music business, because if somebody this good is still unknown, what hope is there for the rest of us? Yeah. Fortunately, that changed within a few years, and people do know who he is, and as they should. But at the time, I had studied with some of the like hotshot guitar players in the local music scene. Okay. And two of the guys that I studied with had studied with him, had studied with Joe, and I didn't know much about him. I only knew he was like this mysterious guy, and some people said you should not study with him. And I said, why? Well, he makes you practice more than you've ever practiced. It's terrible. And I said, well, that actually sounds great. That sounds like exactly what I need. And so I went to him, and I studied with him for about 2 years. And during that time, I heard that Testament was looking for a guitar player, and I had actually he was the one that suggested I should go for it. He didn't know much about the band, but just he knew that just the chance to perform and to have real world experience would be very valuable.
Right.
So he was very, very encouraging, and I think at the time I studied with him, I was so young. I mean, it was like ages 14 through 16. Mm. So a lot of it was over my head. He would talk about these concepts of music, and I just I was a good player for my age, but a lot of the musical ideas at that time were just I wasn't ready for. But a few years later, I was ready, and I always kept my notes and eventually I put started connecting the dots for everything he was showing me, and then it made sense, and I was able to do my own thing with it, and it really sort of, I think, planted the seeds for the directions I would go in later.
And what would you say was the one solo that you wrote that was the most inspired by that or those type of lessons?
There was a song called Alone in the Dark.
Okay.
Which is off the first Testament record.
Right.
And it's an unusual song.
Yeah.
Because, for the musicians out there, it's in A.
Yeah.
Right? Which is kind of radical for the Testament record, because most of our stuff is in E.
Yeah.
But it was very modal, and it definitely had some of that influence.
Oh, crazy! Yeah. All right, okay.
But it was way back when, and I purposely, as time has gone on, I've tried more and more to do my own thing. And
okay,
it was actually Joe who told me to avoid being too influenced by popular players before he was even well known. He just said, whoever the current guy is, and at the time, Steve Vai, who ironically had been a student of his.
Oh my God!
But also Yngwie Malmsteen.
Yeah.
That was like my obsession at the time. I came into Joe. I was learning Yngwie licks, and he said, it's good to study it, try to understand what he's doing, but don't try to sound too much like him. Don't try to, there's only one him, and. And that was great advice.
Right. I mean, I think what I loved about and I always say this, like Alex Skolnick sort of adds the very melodic element to Testament's brutal music, and the contrast is, for example, when you look at the Gathering album, which you weren't on, that didn't have much, melodic sort of guitar playing on it, but then radically after you joined, that sort of element came back in, which is really cool because I think a lot of metal bands miss this element, which is it's okay to have feel in your guitar solos. It's okay. It takes the song somewhere else.
Yeah, I will admit I really noticed it recently because it was the anniversary of the Gathering.
Right, yeah.
And we
great record, by the way.
And it's great.
Yeah.
No, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
And I actually have new appreciation for it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm going to be influenced as I write new material.
Yeah.
But we actually played the record live for the first time, along with the New Order.
Right.
Because it was like the 20-year anniversary of the Gathering, the 30-year.
What a show.
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. It was for the Decibel Magazine Metal and Beer Fest, a 2-night festival in L.A.
Whoa.
And Triptychon was the second night. We were the first night.
Okay. Wow.
And some great bands with us, Black Dahlia Murder and some others.
That's a tiring
Pig
weekend.
Destroyer. Yeah, it was great. It was packed. There were vendors of all types, magazines. Metal Blade had a booth with all their records, and plenty of beer vendors. It was a really cool event.
Very cool.
Yeah, so we did the record. We did the Gathering, and I got great appreciation for the songs. But then playing the New Order, which had all my stuff on it, and a lot of
Yeah, very big
I'd co-written every song, and then play. There's just so much more soloing wise there. The Gathering was also done at a time when they're just solos weren't the priority.
Right. Yeah.
And which is fine, but yeah, you really notice a difference. And if I may say so myself, I think it does add something different. It adds a flavor that
I think so
you
too.
don't hear in all the bands.
I mean, you also see it in when Metallica released Saint Anger, right? And then they ditched the guitar solos, and you could see it was a huge departure from their regular sound. It was just there's always something missing when a good guitar solo isn't in the song.
And it's something I never understood, and I think people wonder why I got into improvisation, and well, one of the reasons that you can solo, it's all about solos.
Yeah.
And this was in the mid '90s. Suddenly, solos are bad. No, I don't think so.
Well, they made a very big comeback though in I think the early 2000s when you started seeing this new wave of American heavy metal. That's sort of like the bands like Lamb of God and which you've actually played on one of their records.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, well, that was another thing. I should, in fairness, I really should mention that was those guys. They're good friends. And we just did a tour with them and Slayer, and we've done other tours with them. So at this point, we have a lot of history. But before the Testament reunion, they had brought me in to play on the record, Ashes of the Wake. And certainly that helped plant the seed, I think. I mean, even before the offer came to play with the original Testament, that really got me thinking, okay, I'd like to do a metal project. I don't know what it is. And I was thinking, maybe I could get one of put a band together. Yeah. Somebody from one of these bands and a couple other bands, maybe somebody from the old days, And I was already thinking about it, but then the Testament thing happened. Okay, this is my metal project. Perfect.
Awesome.
It might as well, what, if I'm going to do one project where I'm really diving back into the metal side of it, it might as well be with Testament,
which I'm sure the metal community is super grateful for because I think your addition back into Testament was I think it was very important for the career or the path of where Testament was going. I think as I'm just talking as a rock fan, of course, it just for me it added such a different dynamic to the music.
Oh yeah, and I was going to mention one more thing where we're just talking about solos and how they sort of disappeared partially from heavy stuff, but then around the early 2000s,
right.
It was great to see it coming back. Children of Bodom came out, right? You got Alexi, groups like Dragon Force. It's just like
really
crazy playing. So it's nice. But bring it back. It really, never should have gone away.
When you said there was no guitar solos, I just remembered the new metal period, right? Limp Bizkit and Korn, and it's such an interesting time in metal, and I can understand why a lot of bands drop the solos, because when you see bands like Limp Bizkit and Korn becoming literally the biggest music entities on the planet, right? That sort of becomes enticing, and it becomes like, well, if they're doing it and they're sort of becoming the biggest band in the world, then maybe there's something there in that formula.
Right.
So
it's also their thing, and it works for them. But just because it works for them doesn't mean it would work for you.
Did you ever get into that type of music? Was it ever something you would like, you know what, Fred Durst isn't so bad?
No.
Okay.
I mean, in fairness, like I've seen Korn. Monkey is awesome. I mean, we follow each other on Twitter.
Right.
We've direct messaged. We've hung at festivals.
Cool.
Great guy.
That's awesome.
I like the band.
Yeah.
But it's a different thing, and it wouldn't. It wouldn't be my thing.
Right. No, I could definitely see why that wouldn't work for you. I mean, because you sort of left the metal world and delved even deeper. Like you moved away from the whole poppy element of music and just sort of delved into theory and jazz. And that, I guess, takes me to.
Right. I wanted to know. I wanted to know what Chick Corea was doing, and
right. Yeah.
how to solo over Windows by Chick Corea.
Did you?
Or how to write a tune influenced by that, and how to write a chart and share it with other musicians, and how to play with an upright bassist, how to play with a horn player, how to play with a piano, like all these things. It's like I realized, wow, there's, you can have all this experience as a musician, but you can still have, major gaps.
And this goes back to the trio, right? You started the Alex Skolnick Trio at that time, and that's such a departure to. I mean, a metalhead who was used to you with Testament is now listening to your jazz music,
right?
And getting into jazz, was that a difficult transition for you?
Yeah, well, I probably had like literally like a half dozen projects before that.
Okay,
I just wasn't a natural band leader. I'm a bit of an introvert. It's one of the reasons why I wanted a band to join when I joined Testament. I needed an existing band. I'm not a taskmaster. It just doesn't come naturally. And like rounding people up, motivating them. Come on, guys. We got to do this. So those years outside the band, it was really like starting over, and sort of learning to have a vision, learning what works, what doesn't work, learning to take criticism, or learning to decipher what criticism to take and not to take, learning to be honest. It was just a lot of lessons. It was like this whole period of starting all over. So by the time we get to like the late '90s, early O's, I mean, moving to New York, it was really like the ultimate of just we're starting over.
Wow.
And it came about in a number of ways. But real quick, I'll just mention with the trio, that was one of the times I learned not to plan things, because I did not plan that. That really happened on its own, and it was almost almost a fluke. It was like a little side project I was doing, really just for fun. It was like a just for fun project with friends of mine, and friends of mine who I trusted, other friends that would come and hear us, would pull me aside and say, "Bro, I think you have something here. Like this, this is working." And I noticed that, and I noticed like the effect on the audience. And I realized I loved playing it, and and it's ironic because the basic sound was like a straight ahead jazz guitar sound, but I started I made it different because of my background. I realized, what could I do to make it different? There's a million typical jazz guitar trios, right, where you got an upright bass, drums, and a guy playing like clean jazzy guitar. Well, I have this very unique background, and I sort of just on a whim, I tried doing an arrangement of a Scorpions song, and it was called the song "No One Like You."
Wow!
And people went crazy every time we'd play it. I noticed that we'd be playing these little venues around New York, and suddenly people would perk up. Even the type of places where, it's like a bar and people are there, they don't really care who's playing. And then suddenly, what song is that? Yeah, and then ended up doing this whole album of these types of arrangements, with Aerosmith, Kiss, Ozzy. And it was...
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
I think, and that was the first time I felt ready to release something under my own name. It was, it was a pretty big move at the time for me, because I was still, the guy that used to be in Testament. It's like, okay, how am I going to establish, a name on my own? Yeah, and I didn't really have any ideas, and this was just a fun little thing. And that album ended up like all over jazz radio. Wow. I ended up on going on these public radio stations. It got reviewed in Jazz Times, Downbeat. Wow. I was probably like the only person who it opened for Slayer that was in Downbeat. And that opened up a whole new thing. And since I'm still playing with the trio, we just released an album called Conundrum. that got a great review in Downbeat.
There you go. We're back on Downbeat.
Yeah. And yeah, I've been doing it this whole time. I mean, it's my main project under my own name, but it's not the only one. I've done some other stuff as well. But you were asking like how I got it.
Right.
That. How did the jazz thing happen?
Yeah, because I think there's a human story there that's not just about music, but it's also about somebody who sort of uprooted their life from one place and started completely new and somewhere else and just building it from the ground up, and for you to get to that stage where you thought, I want to do this and I want to reinvent myself. I'm interested to hear about that.
Yeah, well, I just I always appreciated jazz, but I just never for some reason, when I was young, I just never saw myself like falling into it on that level. And by the time I was doing the second Testament record, I just felt like I needed to develop the way I used to, from like the time I was studying with Satriani, right, ages 14, 15, 16. Every year that went by was like this dramatic year. Like you could tell, oh yeah, he's been playing a year longer. Wow, yeah. It meant something. Yet for some reason, by like the time I was doing the second Testament record, I developed a bit, but not as much as I thought I would.
Right.
I just had this period, and I was playing the Testament stuff well enough, but I wanted to. I felt like there's more places to go, and I was already like starting like reviewing my Satriani notebook and kind of just getting back into that. And then at some point I saw a televised concert of Miles Davis in the 80s.
Okay.
Right, his 80s band. And it didn't even register to me as jazz. It was like, I think I don't even know exactly who the musicians were, but it's possible that the bass player might have been like Daryl Jones. Right. He's on tour with the Rolling Stones right now, but he's actually like a super funky bass player.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, or it might have been Marcus Miller. Right. These were like the main bassists that played with Miles. So it's like super funky bass, a screaming guitar. So knowing Miles Davis at that time, it was probably John Scofield or Mike Snern or Robin Ford, whoever. It was somebody fantastic.
Right, yeah.
And just everybody in the band was ridiculous. And it didn't strike me as jazz. It was like rock energy, but funk bass and ethnic percussion, like all this stuff. And these were like the greatest musicians I'd ever heard.
Yeah.
I just thought, okay, that just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, what is that? And so I started studying again, and I sought out jazz musicians in the Bay Area. But they all told me that to play that stuff, well, not only does it take years, but you really need to learn straight ahead jazz music.
Right.
You need to play like regular jazz guitar. You need to be able to play like Wes Montgomery and Charlie Christian and Django Reinhardt. Like you need to know all that stuff beforehand. So I started learning that out of necessity and learning like Charlie Parker tunes and all this classic stuff. And then it grew on me. I liked it. And I realized, wow, it really like balances out the metal side of things. So I instead of just playing the screaming, distorted sound, it was really fun to play like a nice, clean guitar. So I studied for years, and I was going to jazz concerts. I heard everybody from McCoy Tyner to Herbie Hancock to Michael Brecker, just so many different. The thing is too, jazz is such a broad category. It represents like so many different types of music. Gonzalo Rubalcaba, who has this Cuban feel. There's Indian influences in music. I saw John McLaughlin at a small place, Yoshi's, and it was just, doing like Indian influence stuff, and it was amazing. Yeah, so just okay. I was just
Sold.
yeah. I mean, so for like the next few years, I would go to these shows and I would study, and it was always a part of what I did. And I think my playing in Testament improved a lot during that time. That was a big reason why. But I think after a few years, like I just got more and more into it, and I knew eventually, okay, I need to get to a place where I could at least play this stuff that sounds like this and not embarrass myself, and understand it better, and just know the bass. And I started working with like local jazz artists, and just really getting honest feedback. And I think that's another reason why I ended up going to New York and just like starting over and just taking a few years and just being in university and just studying music at that level.
Did people know you at that university?
A few, yeah.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. And that was
Who's
it
your
was really
classmate?
funny.
Oh, Alex Skolnick from Testament.
Including a few like very serious jazz artists that are like now that have like names
Amazing.
in that world. Yeah, it was amazing.
Okay, and
So that was how it started, and
Right.
then that led to the trio, and then it was. But the trio, I would have to say, like it taught me just to not plan too much, and I didn't know what would happen. I didn't plan on having the trio. I didn't plan on Testament getting back together. So like all the thing, I realized the things that I don't plan on are the best things.
right, the things that work out
Yeah.
best.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, the other type of music was basically thrash, and that's obviously something you guys were part of the pioneers. And I've always wondered, obviously, I don't know if you got this question before, and you're probably sure you probably did at some point in the past, but I always wondered why they're the big four and not the big five.
Oh, that's so funny. I was just talking to Aram about this yesterday.
Interesting. So,
The question comes up often.
what are your thoughts? I mean, to me, when you talk about the '80s scene of thrash, it's almost unspeakable not to mention Testament as part of that lineup. And
Yeah.
and I don't know, what's your take on that?
Yeah, interestingly, I have no problem with it
Okay.
because I look at it as a seniority thing.
Right.
All right, so I joined Testament in like very late '85. I think my first gig was like early '86.
Right.
After a couple. So 1986, what happened? Metallica releases Master of Puppets. They're already on their third record, and they were on their way to becoming one of the biggest bands in the world, which was clear.
Good point.
Even then, it wasn't clear they would be like that level, but still, they were going to be the biggest. We knew they were going to at least be as big as like Iron Maiden, Scorpions, and at that time.
Yeah. Oh wow.
So so they're already like off and running. Slayer was released Rain and Blood that year.
Okay.
After having several albums out, Anthrax had several records out. I think at that point Megadeth was on their second record. So that all those bands had, they were past their first record. They were all off and running at the time. The classic Testament lineup was just forming.
Right.
So how do I'm fine with that. I mean, they were there first, and they were doing big things, and we came along a little later. But
Right.
I have no problem with them. Those groups being classified together.
So in these days, right? So you're a much younger Testament, just about to just sort of launching their career. And how was it like when I've always wished I lived or witnessed the '80s at an older age, because I've always wanted to know how that was like. All these bands are sort of starting up, and you guys are in the middle of that, right? So you're sort of starting up as well. And was there like a competitiveness there where you saw like Dave Mustaine playing super fast and you're like, I'm gonna beat Dave Mustaine, play even faster? Or, I don't know. I mean, how was it like at that time, at the '80s, just starting off a band like that, and there was a whole scene of thrash starting?
Yeah,
Or establishing?
I think every band was so different. Like you could not have sounded like any of the other bands if you tried. Nobody can When Slayer first I played, I think I saw one of their first shows. I think I saw their very first show actually in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Wow.
And it was great, but it was
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Oh.
but it was kind of like it reminded me of a lot of Venom, which was it was a very underground band, but it was like Venom with fantastic drumming. Like, holy moly!
Yeah,
if these guys could do stuff and then they developed it, and it really sounded different. But nobody else, sounded quite like that, and all those bands, nobody quite sounds like Dave. Dave's got a very distinct voice.
That's right. Yeah,
and on guitar too.
Yeah.
So it was where I was coming from at that time. I was listening to Ozzy with Randy Rhoads,
right.
Dio with Vivian Campbell, and I liked some of the glam guitar players. There were some great ones. I mean, I always thought
Interesting.
The Rat album I had great guitar playing with Warren DeMartini, Dokken, George Lynch, and even a lot of the heavy players liked them. Whether they'd admit it or not. Everybody admitted the guitar playing was good.
Yeah. I mean, for pop bands or kind of pop bands, they were amazing.
Yeah, and those were all Southern California bands. That was a Southern California thing.
Right.
In the Northern California, you did not do that kind of music. Especially didn't dress like that. And I wouldn't have wanted to. I would not have wanted to put hairspray,
Right.
weird colors, and
Platform boots.
Yeah, that just never made sense to me at all.
Yeah.
And I liked the thrash bands. When I started going to clubs when I was in high school, and the band Exodus at the time was next. They seemed to be like next in line, the band to keep an eye out for, and I enjoyed the shows, and again that first Slayer show I always liked it, but I thought it always seemed like these bands it's more about the riffs. The riffs are fantastic. The drumming's fantastic, and I wanted to hear some guitar more like the Randy Rhoads, and even like the glam guys, Randy Rhoads, George Lynch. How about if somebody plays like that, doing this kind of music? At that time, nobody was really doing it.
Right.
So when I joined Testament as the band, it was called Legacy at the time. But
Right.
when I joined,
Exactly.
I thought, okay, I'm gonna bring some of this flavor in. Why not? And it was.
I totally see it, actually, now that you mention it.
Yeah, it took some, getting used to because it was so different.
Yeah.
But now you think of heavy, music, thrash metal. Yeah, the guitar better be good. It's kind of, it's expected. But at the time, it was very radical. So that I think, just being able to bring some of that flavor, it made the band sound different, and it was very different for me too, because like the guitar players that had my influences, most of them were trying to do, more like glam pop metal stuff,
right?
Which I think it was really done at that point.
Yeah, I think it was at that time as glam started dying out, you started seeing bands like Guns N' Roses appear.
Right, it was exactly at that time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at that time, and then I think what put the nail on that coffin was probably Nirvana, actually.
Completely.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a radical change in sound that sort of sprouted this whole new movement in rock. And I don't know if that was something you were into at the time as a fan. I know that maybe didn't really influence the music, but
I appreciate it. I always thought, it was different. I thought the drums were great. I loved Grohl's drumming.
Yeah.
And, Alice in Chains,
superb.
And I could hear some of the influence. I mean, they'd been into all the same stuff, and it was pretty clear. In fact, there's some Alice in Chains. There's an Alice in Chains song called "Damn That River."
Right. Yeah.
And I swear to God, if you sing "Rat" on top of that, right, sing "Round and Round," it's not that different.
It'll match.
Yes, but obviously the presentation was really different.
Yeah.
The subject matter was very different.
Yeah.
It was very real, haunting, disturbing lyrics. I mean, I think that's part of it, but in some case, sometimes the music's not that different. It's amazing. But I was very open to the stuff. Again, I didn't want to play like that. I didn't think, okay, now I'm gonna be like Cobain and play the Fender. Ironically, that guitar is called the Jazz Master, but it's like the least jazz guitar.
No jazz came out of that guitar from that band. It's funny because I think when you look at those two scenes, thrash and grunge, what Jerry Cantrell did in Alice in Chains is kind of similar to what you did in bringing that sort of guitar solo feel. Which I feel Jerry Cantrell did a lot in that grunge scene. He has that feel in his playing.
Yeah, great feel.
And that's sort of what you did with the thrash scene. Like, I don't think anybody had that same feel that you had. Not even Metallica, although I love Metallica. I mean, everybody knows I love them, but that playing that you brought in was super different to that scene that nobody was doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was part of the challenge for me to say, like, I mean, I'm going to play the way I play no matter what. But part of the challenge was, okay, let's put that into this music, and see what happens.
And Van Halen, was that something?
Huge influence.
Yeah,
probably my biggest influence.
Really,
Eddie on the first Van Halen record. Yeah, I mean
amazing.
the whole first wave of Van Halen, pre Sammy Hagar, and I love Sammy Hagar. I love Van Halen. I just together, I prefer them. I prefer Van Halen with Dave.
Really?
I prefer Sammy's solo stuff. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're more of a David Lee Roth sort of.
I mean, no comparison.
For you. Okay.
Yeah. Especially that first record is still amazing.
It's
still
legendary. Yeah.
I can take that out and just play along to it, just to brush up on some stuff, and I'm inspired.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. There's very few albums like that.
Did you have a poster of Eddie Van Halen and there's like, one day I'm going to be just like you, Eddie?
I didn't have like a giant poster, but I had some pictures. Yeah. But you got to be careful what you wish for. You never really want to be just like someone because he's the same guy that Sammy wrote this book about. That's like really a very troubled individual,
right? Yeah,
who seems he seems much better now, thankfully. But
it's interesting with these bands. It's you read about these bands like Van Halen and Guns N' Roses and their history and their rock history, and it almost makes what makes the music. Well, I don't want to say the music, but just what makes it a different package is when you know their history and what sort of drama they went through to get to where they got to. Eddie Van Halen being who he is, but he's also this amazing musician, and you can't have that amazing musician without some of the baggage that comes with it.
Right.
It's just him. He's an artist, and
true artist. So came with a lot of baggage.
Right, I'm sure. Yeah, and so looking back now, and I'm looking at some of the more recent stuff that you're doing, and one of your latest records, or the latest record you just guys released with Testament. I was reading some of the interviews with Chuck Billy and Eric Peterson saying that it was kind of a tough time writing that record. I never understood why that was. Is there something that happened there that was interesting that you could share with us here?
Well, I think by the time that record was being worked on, like so many touring opportunities came to Testament.
Okay.
And Testament is a band that really needs to focus to not be on the road when writing a record.
Right.
I've heard about bands that can work on music on the road. It's really tough, especially now. Especially because to make it sound different. The band was touring a lot, and it just got to the point where a record needs to be done, and needs to be done very, very quickly. Excuse me. So I think on this, we're already talking about the next record, and we started working on it, and we sort of designated time to write it. and write ideas. But this last one, there just wasn't that much time. So, Eric, I think, he had a lot of material laying around that he was able to put together for it. And just, I had some ideas too, but it was because, there was this time crunch. It ended up mostly being Eric, as far as like creating the riffs.
Right. Yeah.
But that, and those, it was just a lot of pressure. Those guys, you can talk. If you ask them, they'll say the same
interesting.
thing. I think it's better to do a record without too much pressure. So I have a better feeling about this next one.
Okay.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, it's amazing though. Like I don't remember one Testament record that wasn't good.
Yeah.
I mean.
They're all going to be good. I mean, they're all going to sound like the band.
I mean, I guess as a listener, as a fan, you probably don't know much of what happens behind the scenes, but at the end of the day, it just sounds good, and that's what we get at the end of the day. It sounds like a really kick-ass record. And I just going back to your career as a guitar player, I just saw recently you did something with Bangor Studios, so almost like a Guitar Hero competition.
Right.
I forget the name of it.
It's called Shredders of Metal.
Shredders of Metal. That's I saw the entire thing. It was pretty cool. I love the concept, very different concept, and I love that you were on it as a judge. How was that experience for you?
It was great. I mean, I knew those guys would put together a great program. I mean, they're just I'm a big fan of their documentaries, and they're just so good at producing. I mean, Sam is he's just brilliant. I mean, he's really the visionary there, but he's also got a great team around him that kind of helps him achieve his vision. And I knew it would be done with great humor, and as soon as it was brought up, I thought, okay, this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
If the same idea had been presented to me by somebody else, I'm not sure I would have done it. The idea of a shred guitar competition show.
Yeah.
But knowing Sam and knowing Banger and just being a fan of their documentaries from Rush to Maiden to Metal Evolution, it's all so high quality.
Amazing.
Yeah. So I had a great time with it, and it reached a lot of people. I mean, I hear about it. People come up to me all the time that have seen it. That
in Dubai.
Love it. Yeah.
Who'd have thought? So I want to wrap it up. I mean, we're closing in on an hour, but I just wanted to know for you today, who from the more, I don't know if I could say recent bands, but who's sort of like inspiring you today as a musician that maybe you want to just shout out for, that maybe I can go check out on my Spotify or my Enrami or whatever it is, just to sort of listen to it, somebody who's inspiring you.
Oh gosh. There's so many. Well, I'll name somebody from the jazz side of things. There's a guy named Nick Barsh.
Okay.
Bartsch. And he's just doing some really different approaches to, and he's a piano player.
Oh, wow.
But the music is like haunting and suspenseful and high energy, but atmospheric at this, like really, really cool.
Wow.
And he's on ECM records. ECM, pretty much anything that comes out on ECM records, I'm a fan of.
Is that the sort of thing you listen to when you're on tour and like that sort of stuff that you?
Yeah, I listen to it a lot because it's also very different than what I do. It's even very different than what I do on the instrumental side of things. So it like helps clear my head. I have to be careful because if I put on, if I put on something with, like a great groove and great guitar, suddenly my brain starts working.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing ideas, and I want to pick up a guitar and play along. And sometimes that's not why I want to listen to music. I actually want to listen to sort of escape.
Yeah.
But then, so I'm selective about what I listen to. But then, there's some younger guitar players that are coming up that are really good. There's actually a guy his name's Dave Davidson, who's in a band called Revocation, which is like a brutal, heavy death metal band. But he can really play jazz guitar.
Wow.
And we were brought together by a metal website, Metal Injection, and just to sort of toss a guitar around and talk music. And I was really surprised. Like he could, I mean, like can really play.
Wow.
You know, and and I think the music they're doing is interesting too. It's different. It's heavy, but it's it's really got a different. It's going into some different directions.
I'm definitely going to check that out. Just one last thing I wanted to ask you. Metal Allegiance, and that sort of like spurred a question in my head as well. How was that project, and how's that project for you? And is there anyone today that you like on your wish list to play with?
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah, well, it's funny because earlier I was talking about the time before the Testament reunion, and I was thinking, it would be nice to do some metal thing again. I don't know what it'll be, and then of course it made sense for it to be Testament, but now I have another metal project.
Right, yeah.
Which is great. And again, this is something that came along. It totally happened naturally. It was not planned. And it's Metal Allegiance, where...
super cool project, by the way.
Super cool project.
Yeah.
The shows are fantastic. We play... Yeah, we only play a few shows a year, but they're events.
Yeah.
And
it's a star-studded event.
Star-studded event, and the records are star-studded.
Yeah,
and it's a record where you really you get to hear my guitar tone too, like as far as like riffs, because I'm the riff guy on this project, as well as a lot of the solos and most of the solos, except for some guests. But on this recent one, we had Andreas Kisser, who we were talking about before.
Yeah, I love Andreas Kisser.
Great guy.
Yeah.
Great guy. Yeah, and he's probably the guy that's done the guest guitarist that's done the most live shows with us. So he's really like tied in with us at this point. Anita Strauss from Alice Cooper.
Yep.
Did a guest. Well, yeah, she's terrific. And my old pal Joe Satriani came on board.
Awesome.
He's on the title track.
Yeah.
It's called Power Drunk Majesty. So, I mean, he's somebody, that would be on the wish list. But it actually happened, and we're trading off solos.
That's amazing.
And it's really, really cool. So, I mean, there's not that many others. I mean, it would be great to get, I don't know how many guest appearances Van Halen does. Not many. So he'd be great. All the guys that I grew up listening to. I should mention there's another project I did, my one acoustic instrumental project. It's called Planetary Coalition, and on that I had it was a very internationally flavored project. So every song features artists from different parts of the world, and I had some great guests on that. And I had Rodrigo y Gabriela.
Oh, amazing!
I'm on one of their records too.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Horacio El Negro Hernandez, great Cuban drummer. I had this great Indian singer called Kiran Alawali. I mean, great. So people should check that out.
There's a lot of music I'm going to be checking out after this podcast, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah. There's a great Middle Eastern artist on there, too.
Oh, really?
Naj Jabran, he plays the oud.
Oh, amazing.
This record's all over the place, but it's people love this record, and I may have to do a part 2 at some point.
That's amazing. I love your musical range. I love that. And then every single thing that you touch is actually really, really good. And that's something that not a lot of musicians can talk. I mean, a lot of musicians can't go out of metal or can't go out of pop, but I mean, for you, that's amazing that you could sort of like touch all these different genres and do really well at that.
It takes a lot of work, I'll be honest.
I'm sure, yeah. I mean,
I don't have time for a lot of other stuff.
Just like music, yeah.
Yeah, I have friends that, they watch these shows, like The Walking Dead.
Right.
They can't believe that I don't know who got killed on The Walking Dead. How can you not know this? I don't have time, because what I do takes time. To have it be high quality, it takes a lot of time.
So that's amazing. Is there something like, as as a person who has done so much, is that something that you like? That's the advice sort of you give people that just focus and focus and focus.
Well, find stuff that you can cut out of your life.
Okay,
I don't need to, you know what?
that's great advice.
Maybe Walking Dead's a great show, and maybe I'll watch it at some point. But like people, I have friends that plan their lives around it.
Right,
Really, the new season, and
I'm guilty. I love The Walking Dead, so
I'm just catching up on Game of Thrones.
right. Okay.
But you know what? I'm watching it at my own pace. But and that's fine. And if you're into it, that's great. I'm also able to cut out the sports because I've just never been a big sports person.
Right. Yeah.
How much time must I save by that? But then again, I do. There are musicians who are huge sports fans too. So
right.
Who knows? I mean, everybody. You have to have hobbies. I mean, you have to have things you like.
Absolutely.
But I think, there's just you choose your leisure time wisely.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah, that's it.
If you want to become like Alex Skolnick, you just gotta cut off some things like The Walking Dead and some.
Not
sports.
necessarily. No, you choose.
Not necessarily that show though.
You can always find things that you
yeah.
don't really need to do. Yeah, that you can sort of focus more time on. And you know what? Or maybe you're a genius, and then you don't need to put that much time into it.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's a whole other thing. I don't consider myself a genius level. My stuff. Everything I do takes work, but hopefully, it ends up good. It drives me nuts. There are like genius prodigies that can just not work that hard and not practice that hard that are amazing.
Yeah. But for the everyday person, that's, I think, very practical advice. And
like Prince, may he rest in peace.
Yeah.
That just could play pretty much every instrument.
Right.
Brilliantly.
Yeah.
Sorry,
he was amazing.
That's superhuman. Yeah, that's very rare.
That's superhuman. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
And apparently he was obsessed with the Minnesota Timberwolves, and he watched every game. So, everybody's different. I think everybody has to find
That's very interesting.
What works for you. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Apparently he was a great basketball player too.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Like phenomenal. Like scary.
Damn.
There's a great Dave Chappelle comedy sketch about that.
Yeah, I've seen that one.
Yeah.
Was it with Charles Murphy? I think it was.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay, so that was based on a real thing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's very true. Yeah.
Okay, amazing. Well, Alex, I took a lot of your time. I think we went into
no
an hour and 15 minutes, but
I did not feel it.
Thank you so much. That's a compliment for me. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Great to be
thank
here.
you so much. And I'm really excited that you're here in Dubai, and I hope you have a great time at the clinic tomorrow with Melody House and ESP Guitars. And
I'm excited, and I just, I hope everybody has a good time, and I hope to come back more often. I like it here.
It's also amazing that it went full circle. Right. You from you learning from Satriani to you now giving lessons and sort of passing on that knowledge to a lot of up and coming guitarists who are aspiring to be like you, which is amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's fun. I remember what it's like to be learning and to be in that position. So I haven't forgotten.
That's amazing.
Hopefully that makes me a good teacher.
That's amazing. And I'm sure you will be. That's amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who listened today. And thank you to Melody House and to Milton and Malia who are with us in the studio right now. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.